following program has been brought to you by Ohel Edo Hemdata and made possible by the support of the Rishon Foundation. For more information, visit therishonfoundation.org. Thank you. Make sure to check out oheledohemdata.org for more programming.
Pesach is one of the most beautiful holidays in the Jewish calendar. But before we sit down at the Seder table, there's a lot that has to happen first. Chametz has to be removed, kitchens have to be prepared, food has to be checked. So in this series, we're breaking down everything you need to know to get ready for Pesach, step by step. Welcome to the Pesach Prep. In this episode, we're starting with the most important question of all. What exactly is Chametz? Hey everybody, Rabbi Shais Rishon here, aka Manish Tana. You'd think that somewhere across almost 20 years working under a name like Manish Tana, there'd be some record of a Pesach-themed video talk or presentation out there somewhere, but surprisingly, as was pointed out to me the other day, there shockingly isn't. So, here we are. And over the next few days or so, we're going to be going over some basic to medium points of prepping your house for Pesach. Now, since a lot of these laws are very detailed or tedious or particular, even though I will see your questions in the chat, I will not answer them until the next stream. I don't want to give an answer off the top of my head that ends up being wrong or misleading or misinterpreted. But please, if you have any questions about anything we're covering today, feel free to drop a question in the chat. All right? Okay, let's get into it. Before the first cup of wine is poured, before the matzah is broken, before the story of the Haggadah is even told, everything about Pesach preparation revolves around one concept: Chametz. The prohibition of Chametz comes from the Torah itself. In Exodus 12:15, right before the Israelites leave Egypt, they are commanded to eat the Passover sacrifice with matzah and bitter herbs. At the same time, the Torah says, Shivat yamim matzot tochelu, for 7 days you must eat matzah. Ach bayom harishon tashbitu seor mebatechem, but before the first day you must remove all leaven from your homes. Ki kol ochel chametz v'nichta hanefesh hahi miYisrael. For anyone who eats chametz, that soul will be cut off from the nation of Israel. Miyom harishon ad yom hashivi'i. It is forbidden from the first day until after the seventh day. So, examining that verse, we notice some fairly harsh language, right? Anyone who eats chametz, that soul will be cut off from the nation of Israel. What does that cut off from the nation of Israel part mean? Well, this is the punishment known as karet, meaning cutting off or extirpation. So, and what is this? What is this karet punishment exactly? So, in Jewish law, there are four main types of capital punishment that the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court, can administer. There's stoning, skila, beheading, hereg, strangulation, chenek, and burning, srefa. So these punishments were doled out for the worst sorts of moral, sexual, or spiritual transgressions like murder, blasphemy, witchcraft and sorcery, child sacrifice, incest, rape, adultery. However, since Jewish law requires formal warning of the perpetrator prior to their sin, and since it solely relies on the testimony of two witnesses and does not accept circumstantial evidence, most of the time, such death penalties were never enacted. For such instances, punishment was beyond the power of the courts to, if you'll excuse the pun, execute, and so they were left in the hands of heaven to be doled out divinely. So someone who escaped the penalty of strangulation, for example, might end up drowning to death, or someone liable for stoning might die in a freak avalanche. However, the most severe of these divine punishments was karet. So karet is a form of divine punishment in Jewish law that can manifest in any combination of ways of the sinner being cut off, including the premature death of the sinner, either before the age of 60, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, or before the age of 50, according to the Babylonian Talmud, thus being cut off from the world early. Another manifestation would be dying childless, or having one's children die within their lifetime, thus being cut off from a legacy that survives oneself. Or lastly, and most severely, karet can manifest as the complete extinction of the soul after death, thus being cut off from its divine source, cut off from the afterlife, and cut off from a future spiritual existence, with no share in Olam Haba, not even getting judged in Gehinnom, and not even being resurrected at the coming of Mashiach in the end of days. Just a quick tangent here. I know some of you have probably heard that Jews don't believe in hell, or Jews don't believe in heaven, or Jews don't have an afterlife. All of those are extremely false. Judaism has an extremely detailed cosmology of both heaven, Olam Haba, and hell, Gehinnom, and has had it for millennia. Gehinnom in particular, with rare exception, is not eternal as the Christian conception of hell is. In most cases, the maximum amount of time the worst of the wicked spend in Gehinnom is 12 months. This is the reason why the Kaddish prayer for the dead, which serves at the purpose of protecting the deceased from the punishment of Gehinnom, is only recited for 11 months after the death of a parent, because to recite it for a full year would be disrespectful, because it's effectively saying that one's parent was counted among the most wicked and thus needs the full 12 months of the Kaddish's prayer's protection. Also, seeing as how we're talking about it, Gehinnom is actually quite relevant to karet, as the third chamber of Gehinnom, called Duma, has 4 entrances, and at the fourth entrance, there exists an overseer of that chamber named Askara. So this overseer is the one who causes children below the age of 20 to die. Additionally, the fourth chamber of Gehinnom, called Tit Hayavin, is where the decrees that a person will not have children, or that a person will pass before their time, this is where they emanate from. So, with so much at stake as consequence, Jewish law understandably treats Chametz as one of the most serious food prohibitions in the Torah. Because of that severity, the Torah doesn't just forbid eating Chametz, it also forbids owning Chametz, it forbids benefiting from Chametz during the entire holiday of Pesach. But what precisely is Chametz? So, in Jewish tradition, there are 5 special grains. Only bread made with these grains requires the blessing of hamotzi before eating them, and saying birchat hamazon after eating them. Only bread made from these grains is obligated to take challah from. The prohibitions of eating and harvesting new grain before the Omer only apply to these 5 grains, and matzah can only be made from these 5 grains. Conversely, only these 5 grains can become chametz. So these are wheat, barley, rye, oats, and spelt. So when one of these grains comes into contact with water and sits for more than 18 minutes, a natural fermentation process begins and it becomes leavened. Once that happens, the food is considered chametz. So that means most familiar grain foods are chametz, like bread, cake, cookies, crackers, pasta, pretzels, and sort of similar products. Even flour itself is usually treated as chametz, because common modern practice is that before the milling process begins, the wheat kernels are tempered, which means they're sprayed with water, and they're left to stand until the moisture penetrates it before grinding. So the only exception is matzah baked specifically for Pesach, where every step is carefully controlled so that the dough never has time to ferment and doesn't come into contact with water for more than 18 minutes. So in practice, almost anything made from these 5 grains is treated as chametz unless it is specifically prepared for Pesach. So the prohibition of chametz begins even before Pesach itself starts, with a series of escalating deadlines on the morning of the 14th of Nisan before the holiday. So in Jewish law, the day is divided into 24 equal parts. 12 for the day from sunrise to sunset, and 12 for the night from sunset to sunrise. These halachic hours are not fixed 60-minute periods like secular hours. Rather, they vary in length based on the season. So after the fourth halachic hour of daytime, chametz may no longer be eaten. After the fifth halachic hour of daytime, even deriving benefit from it, selling it, feeding it to animals, using it is forbidden. And before the sixth hour of daytime, any remaining chametz must be burned or disposed of. From that point until Pesach ends, chametz is completely prohibited. So why the early start? Well, the Torah links the prohibition of chametz to the time when the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, could be offered on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. So to prevent any mistakes, the sages moved the deadline earlier. Better a fence around the law than a stumble into violation, especially if the threat is utter destruction of either self or family. In addition to eating chametz, owning chametz is also forbidden, and Jews remove it from their homes, offices, cars, any other place that belongs to us before Pesach. Now, although it's praiseworthy to be stringent for Pesach, keep in mind that dust is not chametz, right? The main purpose of cleaning and searching for chametz is to remove any chametz that one may come to inadvertently eat or derive benefit from during Pesach. So this obligation to get rid of chametz does not extend to inedible chametz or tiny crumbs or particles of chametz that are so spoiled or inedible, that even a dog wouldn't eat them, right? So the key areas to focus on are things that may come into contact with food, since we are forbidden to eat anything with even a trace of chametz. So the kitchen should be thoroughly cleaned. All surfaces should be covered or kashered. If you're using your regular utensils or appliances for Pesach, they will need to be kashered, depending on the material, right? If finances permit, it's better and easier to simply just buy a new set of Pesach utensils and just put them away during the rest of the year and only use them for Pesach. But we'll get into all the specifics around cleaning and kashering in a later video. For right now, we're just going to remind ourselves that the point is not removing dust. Dust is not chametz, and cleaning for Pesach is not spring cleaning, right? The point is removing anything edible that might be eaten accidentally during Pesach. Now, some chametz is just too valuable to throw away, right? Large quantities of food, liquor collections, commercial inventory. Jewish law therefore allows chametz to be sold to a non-Jew for the duration of Pesach. This is not symbolic. This is not a loophole. This is a real legal transaction conducted by a rabbi. So the sold chametz is then set aside in a designated area and remains the property of the non-Jewish buyer until after the holiday of Pesach is over and after it's sold back to the rabbi, right? During that time, during Pesach, the non-Jewish buyer can come in and partake of it at any time that they so choose during the holiday, because it legally belongs to them and you do not own it, so you can't stop them or get in your feelings about it. It's their chametz. So once it no longer belongs to a Jew, the prohibition of ownership of chametz no longer applies, right? Now, Jewish law also prohibits benefiting from chametz that was owned by a Jew during the holiday. If you find such chametz after the holiday, it has to be destroyed rather than eaten. If you find it during the holiday, it gets destroyed after Pesach. So this is why observant Jews often check whether a Jewish-owned store has properly sold its chametz before purchasing bread or any other chametz products immediately after Pesach. Further, it's a severe biblical prohibition to benefit from chametz during Pesach by things like feeding it to one's animals or feeding it to wild animals, selling it or giving it as a gift to anyone, even someone not Jewish, after the prohibition time has begun on the day before Pesach. Intentionally inhaling the smell of baking chametz for pleasure, can't do that. Or benefiting indirectly, such as using money gained from the sale of chametz during the prohibited time. So there are limited situations where benefit might be permitted, such as non-food products that contain chametz ingredients may be permitted. Again, especially if the ingredients have disintegrated or the product is inedible to the point of being unfit even for a dog. Or cases of medical need where there's no alternative available. The chametz of a non-Jew owned during Pesach is permitted to be eaten and benefited from after the holiday. That's why you can shop at non-Jewish owned stores after Pesach, or from a Jewish store that has properly sold its Chametz inventory. So, lastly, for this video, before we wrap up, we're going to talk very quickly about kitniot, right? So, in addition to the Torah's restrictions on owning and eating and benefiting from chametz, an Ashkenazic minhag developed in the Middle Ages to not eat certain foods collectively known as kitniot. So, kitniot include foods that many Ashkenazi communities avoid during Pesach, like rice, corn, soybeans, lentils, peas, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, quinoa sometimes. So these prohibitions apply only to eating them and only for Ashkenazi Jews. Right? The rest of global Jewry do not hold by kitniot. These foods are not chametz. Torah and halakha does not forbid them. They do not ferment like the 5 grains. And most importantly, kitniot may still be owned and used for non-food purposes during Pesach by Ashkenazi Jews. So, however, medieval Ashkenazic authorities prohibited eating kitniot during Pesach because they felt they can resemble grain products or be processed similarly. But again, the Halakha, Shulchan Aruch, Kaf HaChaim, Yalkut Yosef, kitniot are perfectly fine to eat during Pesach and are not chametz, except specifically for Ashkenazim. So, once we understand what chametz is, the next question becomes much more practical. Where does chametz actually show up in modern food? Because it turns out it's not just bread. So, tune in tomorrow for our next episode of the Pesach Prep, and I'll see you there.